Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Joe Tyrrell and welcome back to The Runoff, the GP blog podcast. I bet you didn't think you'd hear me say those words, but we are back and better than ever. And after a thrilling 2021 season, we're hoping for more of the same this year. Joining me is an all-new cast, but you're still stuck with me to take you through the trials and tribulations of the coming season. This is the 2022 season, episode 1, and it's good to be back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's 2022, and joining me this year, I've got an all-new panel of experts. You may recognise Cameron from our videos, but also joining me is Toby McCluskey. How are you, lads?
Yeah, well, good, thanks, mate. What about yourself?
I'm very well, thank you, Cameron. Toby, making your debut on the GP Blog Formula One channel. How are you?
I'm very good as well, thank you. I'm hoping that my voice isn't too annoying for all you people, because you haven't heard me yet, but, I'm here now.
But before we look back on pre-season and forward to the new season coming, let's go through some of the headlines. So in the news, lads, it's pretty clear that other than pre-season testing, the big news has been Drive to Survive. Have you watched it first and foremost?
I have. I've watched every single episode. I'm not sure Cam's watched them all.
Yeah, I've watched 8 so far. I know you have some strong views about it, Joe.
Yeah, well, I'm probably not in a great position to talk about it, to be honest, because I've only watched 2 episodes and I kind of refuse to watch any more. But I just think it's a really controversial subject, and it's Drive to Survive has meant it's brought in a whole new audience. And in that respect, it's great. But I think this season, it's maybe just one too many. It's clear they're just trying to dramatize it. And it's so obvious that the 2021 season is probably the most dramatic season ever. But even then, I think they took the mick a bit with it. Like there was misplaced radio messages, different video clips from different races. It just felt like they were dramatizing it for the sake of it. I don't know what you guys think of that.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying on that. The way to look at it, I think we mentioned before we started recording, was that the season 1, when they first did it, was kind of like more of an insight into Formula One, whereas now they decided to make a whole episode on a battle between Esteban Ocon and Yuki Tsunoda, which really just makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's the way they're trying to get views. I understand it. It's the way they make money. But I think obviously the cinematography is excellent. It's Netflix, so what do you expect? But the storylines are sort of fabricated for viewership, which is understandable. I get that they're in it to make money, but as F1 fans, it doesn't quite paint the picture that you'd expect.
And I think from my point of view, having sat through pretty much every race last season, watched every race, live blogged a lot of them as well, it sort of was like that wasn't the case. And especially I've only watched 2 episodes, so I didn't even know there was an episode about Tsunoda and Ocon. So, but I think the second episode's about McLaren and Ferrari, mainly McLaren, and they sort of tried to make out there was this big rivalry between Norris and Ricciardo and that they sort of almost had beef, but it's literally completely the opposite. And so I don't agree with Max Verstappen on many things, but one thing I did agree on is that they completely fabricated that rivalry, and I just don't think it was necessary, because first and foremost, the cinematography, as you mentioned, Cam, is unbelievable. Like, I think it's probably one of the best produced things on Netflix, and it's probably, I reckon it's in their top 10 of most popular shows. And so I don't think it's necessary. That's the big issue I have with it. And I watched the Sky did a documentary as well on Hamilton and Verstappen. It was like a 2-part, and it was, the cinematography probably wasn't as good because they were just using footage from the season, but it was just a lot more realistic and a lot more accurate. And I just feel like, yes, they're bringing in these new fans, but they're also alienating current fans.
Yeah, they've almost shot themselves in the foot a bit, because there's the risk that you could lose a lot of fans because of the way that things are portrayed. And one thing that I didn't really like at all was the fact they kept going back and forth. If, for an example, they made it, say, 2 races per episode and went through the season in chronological order, picking out the bits and bobs, and like you said, it was probably the most dramatic season to date. There's so many different talking points from it, but they just skipped out on quite a few and decided to make up a load of rubbish, dramatized things like the Norris Ricciardo thing, which just doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when you watch a series, it generally is chronological. That's the point of a show. You get the plot at the start and then it develops to the end. Whereas it was, you watch a race and then about 3 episodes later, you come back to the same race, and it did feel a bit sort of disjointed and trying to fabricate some storylines.
I get that they were trying to cover all the different storylines, and as you said, by doing that covering a lot of different storylines, well, one episode a storyline almost, like they had to make stuff up because the storylines just weren't there really. Whereas what I think they would have been better off doing is covering it race by race, especially with the season we had. I just think it would have made for a better watch from a loyal fan perspective, sort of someone who's been in Formula One before Drive to Survive. They would have kept that audience and they would have still attracted the new audience. I think they're there because they find the Formula One interesting now, and I'm sick of it. So I don't know if they've got a season 5 renewed, but I sincerely hope not. But we'll move on from Drive to Survive and on to postseason, which, well, I don't know. I haven't watched Drive to Survive, so I don't know how much they covered in that. But the postseason has been pretty mental with the FIA announcing their review, Michael Massey leaving his role. First of all, lads, I want to ask Cam, I'll start with you. Do you think Michael Massey's firing was fair, and what have you made of the team's reaction since?
I think it kind of was fair. I think some people view it as harsh. Everyone makes mistakes. Drivers make mistakes in every race, but he is at the top where you can't make mistakes, really. And I think the reaction that his decision in the 2021 finale had, it was never going to end with him keeping his job, I don't think. I think the way that Hamilton sort of ghosted everything for about 2 months, wasn't active in public, wasn't showing his face in Formula One, there was doubts whether he'd continue. I think it was going to be one or the other, really. I don't think Hamilton would have stayed if Massey had stayed in his role. I think what's more valuable, someone who's replaceable like Massey or a 7-time world champion like Lewis Hamilton?
I would imagine, Toby, you're probably of a similar opinion. I've got the impression we all are.
Yeah. In short terms, the mess was made by him, so he needed to go.
Yeah.
I think it's as simple as that. He pretty much changed the rules during the race because he wanted to see a nice final lap that was exciting and could not kind of dictate how it was going to end up. So I feel like he's brought it upon himself.
Yeah, I think it was quite telling that. So they announced Michael Massey leaving on the one day, but the day before, I think that there was some radio messages that got leaked, the Jonathan Wheatley ones, I think it was, from that last lap. And I think they were almost a final nail in the coffin. And I think if the FIA, the decision was probably made long before this, but I got the impression that these got leaked and they were not a good look at all. They had no choice at that point for me. And I feel like that sort of got overshadowed a bit because they made the Michael Massey decision. And I think in some respects, it was a PR move it was damage limitation for the FIA and from them from a credibility point of view. So I agree, lads, he didn't have anywhere to go. But it'll be interesting to see how the stewards do this year because there's 2 stewards rotating the role, isn't there?
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. But we'll go on to some news from this week now, something that broke literally this morning. Sebastian Vettel will not race in this weekend's Bahrain Grand Prix season opener, which is a great shame. Obviously, he's tested positive for COVID-19 and we wish him a quick recovery. But that does open the door for Nico Hülkenberg to return. Could this be his chance?
Yes, but no. We know that he is a good enough driver to get on the podium. Obviously, he hasn't yet in his career, but there is obviously all the chance in the world that he can. But I feel like we all want him to, but we don't know enough about the Aston Martin car itself and how it will compete.
I think that he had the best opportunity when it was Racing Point in 2020 when he got, was it 4th at Silverstone?
Didn't he test positive? Didn't he? Oh, he didn't even start the first race at Silverstone.
Yeah, he didn't start the first one and then he started the second one, got 4th. And I think it was one of those. It's like if that happens, then you're sort of consigned to the fact it's never going to happen. I think I rate Nico Hülkenberg, but I don't rate him in a top 3 podium winning drivers, especially with the lineup we've got this year in the grid. Plus, I don't think the Aston Martin is good enough to elevate the gap in driver quality between himself and the Ferrari drivers, for example.
Well, lads, that's all for the news. We'll move on to the winners and losers of pre-season testing now. Right, lads, pre-season testing, I'm not going to lie, it was a bit of a snooze fest, but it was other than Drive to Survive, it was the big story last week. And over the last 3 weeks, because obviously we did have the Barcelona test beforehand, but we're basing this mainly off of the Bahrain test. So winners and losers. Toby, I'll come to you first. Your first winner and why?
So my winner of pre-season testing is Ferrari. Obviously, everyone knows that Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz are extremely talented drivers, but in the pre-season testing, they just looked extremely good. And I don't know whether it is the fact that Ferrari have managed to just absolutely boost their car this year compared to, obviously they finished 3rd last year, so I'm not saying they did bad, but they seem to maybe have closed the gap to Red Bull and Mercedes a bit more than we think. And then Charles Leclerc looked brilliant in pre-season testing, and I think they are going to be a lot of people's favourites heading into the first race of the season.
Yeah, I think Ferrari, I be honest, they were always sort of anticipated that they would be probably the 3rd best team on the grid, but I don't think anyone, and everyone knew that they were putting all their eggs in 2022 and onward. However, I don't think anyone really expected how good they would actually look.
They're certainly a winner. I think they look the best was maybe a stretch too far, but they have certainly had the biggest sort of improvement. They've definitely closed the gap. It's no longer a top 2. It's now a top 3. I think Ferrari look good, and it wouldn't be a surprise to me if they get pole, win the first race of the season. But I think Red Bull are my winners. I think the upgrades they brought, the new side pod, they've done something to that car, even in the Bahrain test. The first 2 days were a bit meh, and then the third day they just came out storming, and they looked immense. They look like, I was skeptical coming into the season. I thought they put so much work into getting Max Verstappen that driver's title in 2021 that 2022 would be an off year while they sort of adjust the regulations. But it doesn't look like that. It looks like they are ready to fight for the constructors and the drivers straight away. They looked really, really quick. And I think that they will be the best team. It's just whether Perez sorts himself out a little bit.
Yeah, Red Bull, I'll be honest. I probably jumped the gun a bit. I wrote Red Bull off a bit. It's just I thought probably made a few too many assumptions. I just thought that maybe them developing their own engine. Obviously, they've still got the help of Honda, but I thought maybe developing their own engine, that might be a stretch too far for them. But I think Friday and Saturday it would have been. They really did come out firing in preseason testing in Bahrain. So yeah, fair play to them. Max looked really quick. And but yeah, as you said, a lot will rely on Perez, I think. But we'll wait and see. Cam, I'll stick with you. Your loser from preseason testing.
Potentially a little bit controversial, but I'm going to say McLaren. Now, I still think McLaren will be fourth. So they've not lost that much, but their issues in preseason testing in Bahrain were worrying, very concerning. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo had COVID. He's now recovered from that. But so Lando Norris had to do the whole load, obviously a bit much for him, but it was more the car. The car looked unreliable. The brake problems they had does not fill me with confidence that they can go into this first race of the season and complete the race. I would not be surprised if McLaren have 2 DNFs. If they've not fixed that problem, they won't finish the race. And that is a concern. Now, it's something they can fix. It's a long season, so having a poor first race doesn't sort of deter me anything, especially because I think if they can sort reliability issues out, they will be the 4th quickest team, but it is a concern that they completed the least number of laps of any team in Bahrain.
Yeah, McLaren, it was probably the worst possible week for them with Ricciardo testing positive for COVID. It looks like he will be fit to race. It wasn't ideal, was it, Toby, for McLaren?
No, it's something did just seem a bit off. And obviously the whole Daniel Ricciardo COVID thing it definitely threw a spanner in the works and didn't help at all. But it seemed as though Ferrari bridged the gap a lot more to the top 2 than McLaren did. And I think that's pretty evident.
Do you think we maybe got our expectations up too much with McLaren? Were we maybe expecting them to be challengers straight away? Maybe they do need a few races of 6 months to get into the season.
I think after the start Lando Norris had to the season just gone, I think a lot of people probably would have gone, oh, Lando Norris is racing well and has started well, so next year it'll be the exact same. And I will admit that I was probably one of those people that got a bit too excited and jumped the gun. But I'm not sure whether others did. I feel like I probably did because I was just a bit excited to see Lando doing well and McLaren doing well.
Toby, I believe you've got a pretty controversial pick, our second loser.
Yeah, so my loser is Williams, only because a lot of people, I think, expected them to do a lot better than they did. And I'm basing this mainly off, obviously we're talking about the Bahrain testing. It just, in my head, they were going to be better. I don't know why, but I just did. And then in a lot of the power rankings, they've been placed 10th. And on day 3, Albon finished 14th and Latifi was 15th with the timings. So it's just, I feel like I'm going to get a lot of stick for it, but I'm just not a huge fan of Williams at the moment.
I think I've certainly been one to overhype Williams a little bit. I thought they'd made big progress last year with the points. The new rules was sort of a opportunity for them to reset and really go again and go hard at it. But yeah, I think they were, if maybe not, I think they were maybe a little underwhelmed. Well, I say a little, very underwhelming from what I anticipated from them. What would you say, Cam?
Yeah, I kind of disagree a little bit. I think that Jos Capito did such a good job when he came into the team, when Claire Williams sort of handed over the reins. And there's part of me that maybe just thinks that Alex Albon is just going to really do well. I don't know what it is. He did really well at Toro Rosso, and I think he's going to have a Gasly-esque sort of resurgence at Williams. And I think he's the sort of ideal man to replace George Russell. He's not going to do as well. I'm not saying that. I don't think he's as good a driver as George, but he will beat Latifi quite comfortably, I think. And I think that maybe the car is still where it was last year in terms of placing on the grid. But I think Albon will not surprise people, because I think people have actually expect quite a lot from him, but I think he'll do well. And I think Latifi maybe gets a bit more stick than he deserves. I think he was quite good last year.
Well, those are our winners and losers from preseason testing. What do you guys think of ours? Let us know what you think of them in the comments, and maybe let us know who your winners and losers are as well in the comments below. So yeah, let's move on now to what's coming up in the season ahead. Right, lads, 2021 was a pretty remarkable season, but 2022 is set up to be just as special. New rules, new regulations, and of course, we got some new tracks as well. We're going to start off with your favourites for the title race. Cam, you've obviously already done our World Championship predictions video, so let us know who you said in that one, and obviously don't give away too much so that people can go and watch that video as well.
Well, I'll leave out who we said. I won't say that as a collective, but my personal favourite has shifted from about 2 weeks ago to now. So call me reactionary, whatever, but I think Max Verstappen is going to defend his title. I just believe that Red Bull have got it right and he will win, but I can equally see Perez not finishing sixth and Verstappen winning.
Toby, do you agree or disagree with Cam on that one?
I feel like Cam already knows what I'm going to say and he's going to call me out for this.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't believe Max Verstappen's going to win, and I think it's going to be a George Russell win.
The fanboy has come out. The fanboy is finally...
That's brave. That is, Toby.
He's gonna beat Hamilton, and then Verstappen will split the two, I think.
Oh, Hamilton third.
Yeah, go on.
That is brave.
Chuck a bit of spice in the first podcast. Why not?
Do you think that as a result, this could be Hamilton's last season in F1?
I think it could, but I feel like people were probably already thinking that anyway. I think if he wins, then he'll go out on a high. But then if he doesn't win, I think he might at this point just be settled and not really too fussed. But obviously he'll want to go for the 8th. It's whether or not he can. I know in Drive to Survive, he was saying how he's fit and ready and all that. And obviously that was last season and he'll be in the same condition for this year. But there is obviously the chance now that he could just leave the sport at any time.
To be fair, I think I've said in videos or podcasts for the last 3 years that this could be Hamilton's last season, and every time it's not happened. So I don't think we can read too much into Hamilton's form or what he might do at the end of the season. But certainly Verstappen does look the quickest. Russell had a bit of joy here and there, but overall it was a pretty underwhelming preseason for Mercedes. So understandably, they're arguably third favourites going into the start of the season, you'd say. But I want to talk about underdogs. I did a Dark Horses video, but lads, this isn't about me. It's about you guys. Who are your underdogs for the 2022 season?
Go on, Toby, kick it off.
So my initial thoughts are AlphaTauri. And Pierre Gasly will outperform Yuki Tsunoda. I reckon he'll come up short compared to his French teammate. But I feel like they'll both be good enough for, I think, potentially even a 4th place finish if McLaren are as poor as they look. We know how strong Gasly is. There's no doubt in that. He could easily, say Hamilton leaves, he could easily be in his seat at Mercedes in 1 or 2 years' time because he is that good. And he has performed in the AlphaTauri. So all he needs to do is continue performing. And Tsunoda had glimpses last season of some good performances, and maybe it's too soon for him to be continuously fighting up at the top. But I feel like they are probably one of the main teams that people will view as an underdog.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I've backed AlphaTauri as an underdog since probably, was it 2019 was sort of pretty big breakout year for them. Yeah, Gasly getting second in Brazil. I thought 2019 was a breakout year, and I backed them in 2020 and 2021 as well. So I think that's a pretty good pick from you, Toby. Cam, who are you going with?
Yeah, it is a pretty good pick. It's kind of what I was thinking. I think I would disagree slightly. I think Tsunoda will do well. I was so looking forward to seeing Yuki in Formula One last year just because of how quickly he'd gone through the formulas. It was just a promotion after promotion year on year. And I mean, we talked about it earlier, but Drive to Survive did highlight Yuki a little bit and showed how he was just not really taking it too seriously at the start of the season, and sort of turned that on when he moved to Italy for the back end of the season. And I think he will do well. I think Gasly will still beat him, but it won't be as anywhere near as convincing as last year because that was slightly humiliating, I think, for Yuki. I mean, he very easily could have lost his seat based on how Red Bull sort of like to push on their juniors if they haven't performed straight away. But in terms of myself, I'm going to double down on Alex Albon. I think he will. I mentioned this to Toby. I could easily see...
You guys won't be able to see this, but Toby's just done the fattest eye roll I've ever seen.
Because Cam's called me out for being a George Russell fanboy, and he is as much of an Alex Albon fanboy as I am George Russell. So it goes two ways. That's why I gave him the biggest eye roll. But sorry, Cam, I interrupted you there.
Toby can call me a fanboy all he wants. But I don't know. There's something about Albon that I think will impress. I wouldn't be surprised if he scores points in the first race of the season. I've said that to Toby before. I think that's one of my predictions. I think he actually will. Surprisingly, I can see a sort of crazy race where he gets a 10th place on his Williams debut. But I just think was unfairly treated at Red Bull. I think his 2020 season, I've said this before, would have gone so much different if he had won the first race of the season, which I think he would have done if Hamilton hadn't shunted him off at Austria. I think if he had won that race, won his first F1 race in the first race of the season, took the lead of the championship, I'm not saying he would have gone anywhere near competing with Hamilton or even Verstappen for that season, but I think he would have kept his seat for last season. Seems extreme.
I think you're spot on there, to be fair. Like, I always felt like he got wiped out in Brazil, then wiped out in Austria, and it was almost doomed to fail. Like, it was just never going for him. There was no luck on his side. So I think Alex Albon and AlphaTauri are two great shouts for underdogs. We've got some new track. Well, we've got one new track on the circuit this year, I think. Depends what happens later on the season with some other tracks. But Miami is locked in for, I think it's mid-May. That looks to be a really exciting track. I can't say I know much about it, but all I know, it's around the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. It looks really cool, and it was kind of inevitable that Liberty Media would move to make another US race. But is that sort of the race you're most excited for this season, lads, with a new venue?
I think it will be. It'll be interesting just to see. I think a new track always brings up surprises. Drivers haven't been able to perfect it. I mean, obviously they'll have sim work, but it's not quite the same as going there season on season. So I think you'll see some red flags, especially with how tight it does look. It does look quite tight, if I remember correctly from the circuit. So I expect some red flags in free practice, that's for sure. But I think it'd be a good track, a good race. I think it was always going to happen, like you say, with how big Formula One is starting to grow in the US, especially with obviously Drive to Survive is another reason for that. I think the sport's growing in there. I think it won't be long before we see an American driver in Formula One. Obviously, Logan Sargent's probably the most likely, given he's in Formula 2. But I think Formula One are definitely pushing for more American sort of audience, and that is obviously going to be helped by another US Grand Prix.
I think it's also massively helped by Drive to Survive as well. So another American race, probably like a Las Vegas Grand Prix, is inevitable, really. Toby, what race are you most excited for this year?
I think the British Grand Prix, and only because I'd like to see Hamilton Verstappen battle there.
Run it back.
Yeah. And maybe not see Verstappen in the barrier at Cops Corner. But I'm going to be honest, I'm not really clued up with the tracks enough to know. Like Cam said, the Miami track seems very tight, but that's all I really know about it. I saw it was announced, it was around the American football stadium, went cool, and then kind of just left it at that. But yeah, I think I'm most excited for the British Grand Prix.
Well, that's the British Grand Prix, but we'll quickly touch on the Bahrain Grand Prix before we head off. The Bahrain Grand Prix is arguably, well, in my opinion, it's one of the most underrated races on the circuit. But the biggest crime of all is that we're not racing on the outer loop, comfortably the best track in Formula One history, and I'm not even prepared to accommodate another argument. But we're doing the normal track this time around, lads. It's a really quick circuit. It's going to be a pretty rapid race. Who are favourites for that one going into it? Probably Red Bull, right?
Yeah, I think Red Bull probably favourites heading into it. I would like to say I do love your sort of all confessing love for the outer loop.
I think it's not even close. It's the best race I've ever watched.
It was an absolute thriller. I'm pretty certain Toby was crying after the events that happened to us.
I definitely was. I think I was probably on the phone.
Yeah, I think I was gutted as well, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm gonna not be the anomaly here, and I certainly was as well. But I think, yeah, Red Bull look strongest. So if I'm gonna have to stick my neck on the line, I'll say Verstappen will win the Bahrain Grand Prix, the opener of the season. But I think Sergio Perez could be miles off. So this has also turned into me just hating on Sergio Perez here. I just think the Red Bull focused so much on Verstappen that no one's ever gonna.
I've said it for years that if Red Bull made a balanced car, they would be better off than what they do making a car for Max, because Max will get the most out of any car. Let's be real. If they make a balanced car, then they've got two drivers who can do that. But
I think even if they made a car for Perez and then Verstappen would be able to drive the wheels off it, it would work. It would work even better than their current sort of their outlook on how to make the best race car.
Exactly. Toby, we'll finish with you. Bahrain, what are you expecting from it this weekend?
I'm honestly expecting, I'm going to go a bit bold here and say maybe one or two red flags. I don't know.
I mean, as long as they're safe, I love a red flag.
I don't know why, but I just have a feeling that Kevin Magnussen's going to end up in some barrier somewhere. he's going to spin, and then maybe like to be fair, I said to Cam, my prediction for first crash was Latifi.
Make it back-to-back crashes.
Yeah, so like I don't know. I think Red Bull's a safe bet to win.
Red Bull is a safe bet.
But deep down, I'm gonna bet on George Russell.
I am also going Mercedes. I say it every year, to be fair, and last year they actually weren't the best team, but I think they just lie every year. It's like, that is just, I won't even call it sandbagging at this point. They're just lying. Like, so I'm going Mercedes. Toby's going George Russell in particular. Cam's going Red Bull. Let us know who you're predicting to win the season opener in the comments below. But lads, thank you for joining me for the first edition of The Runoff. I hope you've had a great time. But from me, Cam and Toby, we'll catch you next time.
See you later.